You've built a successful life, but now what? Welcome to the Gen X Collective podcast. We're for men who are navigating midlife with purpose, health, wealth, family, work, and the mark you've made on the world. We're talking about the stuff that really matters with experts who have solutions, advice, and a sense of humor. And now, here's our host, Laurent Truc.
Welcome back to the Gen X Collective podcast. My name is Laurent, and I am your host for today. Today, we're diving into a topic that hits home for a lot of Gen X men, ADHD, and specifically being diagnosed with ADHD later in life. Dave Delaney is joining us, and he's been leading the charge on this topic on his podcast called The Wise Squirrel, and he's here to share his story and his insights with us. Dave, great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm thrilled to be here. Just for your listeners, it's plural. So just if they're looking it up, it's Wise Squirrels.
Wise Squirrels. Got it.
Yeah,
We'll definitely put that in the show notes so they can find it.
No worries.
Awesome. Can we start with a little background? Tell us a little bit about yourself and Wise Squirrels and how it all came together.
Yeah. So, I was diagnosed 2 years ago with ADHD at 50. So a little bit of a surprise, but then not a surprise. So right away I decided, I'm kind of a product of the good old Web 2.0 days of blogging and newsletters and all social media before it became a cesspool. So I wanted to share sort of my experiences to inspire other adults to learn for themselves and get tested and get diagnosed and treated if need be. And then also, to remove stigmas associated with ADHD, because I've made it this far and I have had some great success. And so wanted to kind of help other quote unquote wise squirrels, these late diagnosed adults with ADHD. And so, started the website, started the blog, and then started the podcast. And the podcasting is a labor of love. I've been podcasting 20 years this October.
Wow.
So, it was just a natural fit to hit record and put the word out.
Very cool. Very cool. How did you find out you had ADHD? Was that something you always had? Like, tell me a little bit about the story of how this came about.
Yeah. So what happened was I was in a mastermind group with two other entrepreneurs. I have a business called Future Forth. I do like corporate consulting and coaching about communication strategy ultimately. Mm-hmm. And so I'm working with two other friends in this mastermind group, the three of us. One of them I knew very well, and the other I didn't know very well at all. He was the friend of a friend. Okay. So the guy I didn't know very well, after a couple of months or a few months of working together and supporting one another, he texts me out of the blue one day and says, "Hey, Dave, do you have ADHD?" And I said, "No." What? And then he said, "I think you do, because I do, and I can see it in you, and you should go talk to your doctor." So I was like, all right. And so I went and talked to my doctor and was diagnosed with ADHD. There's other there's other parts of the story involving my wife, who is a school teacher and teaches, kids of all types, and has said I have ADHD for years. So one rule is, listen to your spouse is probably a good lesson there. And the other side of it is, I was actually diagnosed in 2016 when I went and got tested because she had urged me to go get tested.
Okay.
However, I never received that diagnosis for some reason. I'm not exactly sure how that information was not relayed to me, or whether I was in denial and ignored it completely. I'm not really sure. Mm-hmm. But long story short is, it took me several years later. So when I went to my GP about it this time around, he looked up my charts and he was like, "Oh, yeah, you were diagnosed in 2016. And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, what's a few more years?"
They just never told you.
Yeah, I still don't know. I'm not looking to blame anyone because, it is what it is.
So how did getting diagnosed in your late 40s, how did that shift your view on your past and like who you are?
Yeah, it's a good question. So one of the dangerous things about ADHD diagnosis later is you well, not just with ADHD, actually, with anything, is that if you reflect too much on the past, it can lead to depression. And if you think too much of the future, that can lead to anxiety. And part of the key lesson here is to be present and to try to focus on the now. And of course, that's not always easy, especially when you're running a business. You have to reflect on previous quarters to compare, and you have to look at, goals and what's coming down the pipe. But I learned that, through meditation, mindfulness, and taking that practice really seriously, even before I was diagnosed, that's really helped me. So I think, it's important to reflect on the success you've had, regardless of, what the current state of your life is. So I just learned, one of the biggest lessons I've also learned is to give myself grace and just understand that, I'm going to get distracted by creative ideas. I'm going to hit walls and run out of steam. And that's okay. That's all par for the course. It's just my operating system. So
interesting. Why do you think it went undetected for so long? Did you not show any of the things that you're seeing today back when you were a child, or?
No, I was very much your stereotypical ADHD or ADD kid back when it was called ADD, right? Back in the 80s and 70s. No, I was the Bart Simpson. I was literally the hyperactive, impulsive presentation of ADHD. So there's 3 presentations in one type. It's often misunderstood. So there's kind of a spectrum of ADHD, but the presentations tend to be more of one of the 3. And that could shift through your life. At least that's my understanding. I didn't preface this by saying I'm not a doctor, and nor do I play one on the internet. So just to be clear, but these 3 presentations, I use the Bart Simpson as the hyperactive, impulsive presentation. And then the inattentive presentation is Lisa Simpson. And then the combined presentation is Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes. And so Calvin's sort of that kind of explains it's a bit of both. Inattentive is more, traditionally it's more girls who are missed. They were missed being diagnosed. And that's why so many more women are being diagnosed now, because they weren't really aware or just ignored that presentation. And so, ADHD has nothing to do with your intelligence. You can be highly intelligent. You can be dumb as a stump. ADHD has nothing to do with that.
Okay.
But for, and it's also not based on gender necessarily. So a girl can easily be hyperactive, like, the Bart Simpson bouncing around the classroom and vice versa. But for me, I was very much the Bart Simpson. I was a class clown. I got kicked out of, 5 high schools. Well, 4 high schools, 1 twice. So technically 5 times. Yes, your listeners based in Toronto would probably yell out one name of a high school, and it was probably one that I went to. Be a good likeliness of that. So I did see therapists and things as a kid, but I think I don't know whether I was diagnosed and my parents just chose not to tell me. I don't know, but to my knowledge, that's never discussed until I learned from my doctor in like 2023.
Yeah. When you were young, were there coping mechanisms that you used to kind of manage it?
Yeah. Mainly alcohol was a big one. So drinking like a fish was part of it. I studied improv at Second City in Toronto and performed a lot of improv over the years. And so that was another kind of...
So cool.
Yeah. So, there's good and bad ways to cope with ADHD. Again, you're developing, like, I'm super anal about my punctuality. Like, I'm always on time. If I get to a meeting, I'll sit in my car or like go to a coffee shop and kill time. I won't show up early and be rude, but I'll make sure that I'm in the vicinity so that I can walk in the door right on the top of the time. So I'm very anal about punctuality, but, and so that was sort of a coping mechanism, but there's something called masking as well, where you, even unknowingly, you do things to fit in, or you use humor because you're just not maybe following the plot or whatever. And that's something very much that I do, I use a lot of humor. Even like just talking a lot or mimicking others, or, these aren't everything that I do, but over preparing, people pleasing is certainly something I've been guilty of. All of these things tend to be these masking, these ways of, whether you know you have ADHD or not, you do these things. And if you don't know you're doing it because of ADHD, well, I mean, that can cause burnout. It can cause exhaustion because you're not being your full self.
Yeah.
You're just trying to fit into a neurotypical world.
It's funny. I may have ADHD. I need to get this.
There is a free test at wisesquirrels.com. I will not see the results. There is an assessment on the website, so feel free to give it a go. But I always say, go see your doctor, of course, regardless of what the feedback, what the outcome is on that assessment. But it takes like 2 minutes to do it, so it's worth checking out.
So I love your perspective on this, because a lot of people talk about all the negative sides of ADHD, but it can also be a superpower. Like, what are some of the benefits that you've seen by having attention issues?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer that everybody does have superpowers, although I approach it differently. And I do, like in the coaching that I do with my clients, or with the Root Down, which is the website, or with the presentation that I do about this, I help people identify, who they are and their strengths, but then also how to respect themselves, love themselves, and then how to connect themselves. I say all that because as it applies to superpowers, I do have an exercise that I do with my clients to determine what those superpowers are, or what that superpower is, because we all have something. But it has nothing to do with ADHD. Okay. The thing with ADHD is, and this is something I've written about on Wise Squirrels on the blog. I have a graph that comes up. What happened was Paris Hilton came out with a song about ADHD being her superpower about a year or two ago. And so irked me at first. And then I realized, I shouldn't judge her. I mean, it's not her fault, but she's a good example of somebody that fits into this superpower scenario. And the example I use is, picture a graph, and on the top of that graph is the amount of privilege you have. And on the low end, it's how likely you call ADHD your superpower. And so what that means is that the more privilege you have, the more money, access, health, wealth, all these things, the more likely you're going to call ADHD a superpower, because it does have benefits. There are good things about it, but it's great if you don't have any stress. Sure. And you can just try every idea, willy-nilly, and just start every business. And if they fail, they fail, or start art, become an artist, become a painter, whatever. And if you fail, you fail. It's not a big deal. But on the flip side of that, if you don't have a lot of privilege, if you don't have a lot of money, if you're struggling, if you're unemployed, then ADHD can be a real hindrance. So that's kind of how I look at ADHD being, this term around superpower.
Interesting. So I've heard a lot of people say ADHD, that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that have ADHD, and that actually has, I don't know if there's anything proven to that, but it does help them in some ways. Have you seen that from an entrepreneurial lens, or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there is a study that found that with ADHD, you're like 60 to 80% more likely to have entrepreneurial intentions.
Okay.
And you're nearly 100% more likely to start a business. So 100%. So the Root Down, again, is this presentation I do about ADHD for companies and for conferences and things. I did it for the entrepreneur organization EO in Silicon Valley and Oakland, East Bay. And it was great because I had a room of like 60 entrepreneurs for this small gathering. Mm-hmm. And like what I was saying totally resonated. And the thing is, so many CEOs and founders, you look at people like Richard Branson, or like, all these other, like Toys R Us, Atari, JetBlue, IKEA, Spanx, a lot of founders have ADHD, but they have the support and infrastructure, as I said, to like be able to go full steam on these crazy ideas. And if you have that kind of infrastructure, financial support and investors and all that stuff, then awesome. But if you don't, it can be more challenging. So yeah, I mean, it's very it's very common among entrepreneurs.
Okay. How did your life change day to day from when you were diagnosed? Like, did that make a material difference in the way you approach your day, or?
Yeah, I mean, I learned that. Well, first of all, I learned that I'm not great at everything. Nor did I ever think I was. I wasn't that like big-headed.
Was that a hard lesson?
Yeah. No, but what I learned was that I'm not great at everything, which means that I need help in areas. Mm-hmm. Being a solopreneur for over 10 years, 13 years, I need help with things like I'm great at sales, but I'm not great when filling that pipeline, as the kids say. And so that's part of my challenge, right? Is this sales isn't hard, but filling the pipeline is difficult. So you look at your life and your talents and your strengths through the lens of ADHD. And I always call ADHD my operating system, right? So I understand my operating system now, and I can look with support of, therapy and medication and all that. Journaling, mindfulness, and meditation have been extremely helpful. Okay. I can look at my life through that lens and understand a little better now, where I'm weakest and where my talents lie. And so looking at it that way helps me kind of reconfigure things so that I'm more successful from a business perspective.
Okay. What recommendations would you give somebody that maybe just got diagnosed and probably feels overwhelmed and
Yeah.
It's a lot, right?
Yeah, it is. But I would argue that once you get things kind of handled and you understand your operating system, as I say, the overwhelm doesn't go away, but once you start getting treatment, you get clearer on things. And so the overwhelm is way bigger before diagnosis for sure. So, the recommendations I always say is, first of all, go see your doctor and get a formal diagnosis. You can do the free assessment at wisesquirrels.com if you want to check it out. And something else I always recommend is before you do that, before you see your doctor or before you meet with the doctor, ask your doctor what they think about ADHD.
Okay.
Not whether you have it, but what they think about it. Because if they say, oh, it's, overdiagnosed, or it's something that goes away, it's only childhood, or it doesn't exist, or stuff like that. Or everybody has a little ADHD, which is like the worst thing you can say.
If that was actually my belief before we got up.
Yeah, you were not alone. Most people feel that way. I mean, there's so much misinformation out there, and unfortunately, most of it is spreading on TikTok. And there's studies that have found that. I also wrote about that on Wise Squirrels. So I think talking to your doctor and then finding a path of the doctor that does believe in ADHD, preferably. I always say that if they say any of that stuff that I said, then they probably don't believe in cancer or diabetes or anything else. So maybe time to find a new GP in that case. But with stimulants, they really do help. With a therapist, preferably maybe somebody that specializes in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and executive functioning skills. And an ADHD coach can really help you as well. I do coaching as well. Those are all ways that can help.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there a range? So if you have ADHD, are there extremes where you're going to be pushed towards medication, or are there kind of entry level where it's just like journaling? Like what are some of the ranges here?
Yeah. And again, not a doctor, but my understanding at least is that ADHD is sort of a spectrum. I don't understand enough about the spectrum aspect of it. However, I know that the science says that, stimulants help, regardless of, where you are in life. I mean, the point is that in order to be diagnosed with ADHD, there's certain symbols or certain signs and in the US, there's something called the DSM-5. And I don't know if that's used in Canada or whether they have a different version. I can't remember. It would be interesting to look at that actually. But so the DSM-5 is sort of the Bible for psychiatrists and mental health professionals. And it lists certain checkbox things that you could checkbox to see if you might have ADHD. Some of it is that you have to have shown signs of having ADHD as a kid. And my report cards, I still have them from then, and they all clearly say that. We should have known. And also, if it's disrupting your life, I mean, you might have ADHD and life is going great. There's certain professions that thrive with ADHD, people like medical professionals, especially like EMT workers, police, when you're working like high stakes, military, and you're like, you have to be on the fly. You have to be quick to do, to make decisions. That can be a benefit, some of those traits. So I don't know if I answered your question, but.
No, that was very helpful. I think I agree with you. I think there's definitely a range of mild to a lot more, and probably different things you need to do in each. How does this affect family units? So, taking it from the lens of a Gen X man, right? So a father, a husband, is there coping strategies? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, part of the reason I mentioned earlier that girls were sort of missed back in the day. And so a lot of women are discovering they have ADHD now because of the information around the different presentations, right? Those 3 presentations I talked about. Another way that a lot of women, and maybe men too, to an extent, are discovering they have ADHD is when they get their kids diagnosed. And so what happens is, especially these days, thankfully, mental health is more, acceptable socially. It's more treatable. It's not more treatable, but it's certainly, treatable. There's less stigmas around it, although they still exist, of course. But women who take their child to a therapist because their child's misbehaving at school or what have you, as they listen to the doctor and they go through the testing, they start to realize oh, wait a second. Oh God, this is me too. Yeah. Or the father. And what happens, it's not just the women, it's both. It's just the women who are missed, never were diagnosed. But I'm touching on a point here that's important, which is, and again, not a doctor, but my understanding is it's as heritable as almost as heritable as height.
Really?
And somewhere around 75 to 80% likely that if you have ADHD, one or more of your children has ADHD. And flip it around, that also means that one or both of your parents probably had or have ADHD too. So it's highly heritable. Wow. Which means for the family life, if you're treating a child with ADHD, there's a good likeliness that you or your spouse probably has ADHD too. That's quite a high likeliness of that.
Okay.
And so, so it, I think personally, on a family level, you can then start being more empathetic, or to your children, to your parents.
Sure.
As you start learning about it, you start realizing, it's not their fault that they're behaving the way they may be behaving, or they're facing challenges the way they are. There's ways to treat it, which is part of the reason why treatment is so important.
And you, is the strategy to have those open conversations with your kids? Hey, you were diagnosed. I have it as well. Here are the strategies that work for me, and get them to figure out their strategies, or do they default when they're younger to medication? What's the norm nowadays?
Yeah, I don't know enough about children with ADHD, just because the focus of my podcast is for late diagnosed adults.
Okay.
So I would defer to someone who knows stuff about the kids better. But for me personally, I think the strategies that work for adults also work for children. So, medication, absolutely. I'm a big believer in stimulants. What's great about the stimulants is that they're non-addictive. People sometimes, there's so much misinformation about it that people say, oh, they're addictive. And the thing is, so if you talk to ADHDers, they often forget to take their stimulants, and you can bet that if they are addicted, they're not forgetting to take them. Right. So the addiction aspect is pretty void. So supporting your kid, I think just sharing like there's great books. I interviewed like Dr. Mark Burton on my podcast, who wrote a book about mindfulness and meditation for teens with ADHD and also treating ADHD in teens. And it's a great book as well. So, but yeah, I would defer to those folks or pediatricians too.
When you say stimulants, are they really like it seems counterintuitive to me. Like, wouldn't it be something a little more calming? Or misunderstanding?
Yeah. And I don't know enough about them. Like, I do know they're, for the most part, non-addictive. I think there's probably wiggle room for like a very small percentage. That's my understanding, at least.
Okay.
There's a guy, Dr. Russell Barkley, who I'd highly recommend people check out on YouTube. He's like one of the biggest experts on ADHD, and he's talked about that a little. But no, the stimulants, I mean, there's different types of stimulants, and then of course there's different doses of those, right? So you go through a process of trying, with a psychiatrist or your doctor, being prescribed like, a different, like one type of stimulant over another. And then you start to figure out what dose works best for you, or you switch to a different one that is more effective or that doesn't have side effects, like, maybe keeping you up at night a little and things like that. So, I don't really know enough about like how they work. I leave that for the professionals. Sure. I just do what I'm told.
Very good. Tell us a little bit more about the community that you're building and the podcast.
Yeah. So the podcast, it's funny because in 20 years of podcasting, I finally landed on one where I've got like a pretty decent listenership. Compared to my first one. So my first one was called Two Boobs and a Baby. And so
I would have joined that one.
Yeah. To be clear, it was my wife and I were the boobs. And then it was Two Boobs and a Baby Plus. When we added a character, added a second or a fourth character, my daughter. We always joke that like our ratings were slipping, so we decided to add another kid because that's what American sitcoms always do.
Yeah.
And it was great, like podcasting in the early days too, because this is '05 and I'm from Toronto, so the Canadian podcasting community was awesome, super tight, and we would meet up once a year at a conference in Kingston, and they moved it to Ottawa called Podcasters Across Borders, or PAB. And then there was PodCamp Toronto as well, which was great. I went to that. And then I co-founded PodCamp Nashville after moving from Toronto to Nashville. So the podcasting has always been just such a special thing. And so with Two Boobs and a Baby, we did quite well. We got good coverage as well. We were in USA Today and other media outlets, CBC, Globe and Mail,
cool.
Also reported on us. And then, fast forward all these years, Wise Squirrels and our community, I'm building the community on Substack right now. So I have like 4,500 subscribers, some of which are paying the price of a coffee once a month, which is lovely. And I appreciate that. The podcast itself has had like 62,000 downloads last year and is well on its way to I'm expecting at least 100,000 this year by the way things are going. So it's growing, things are great. It's always the business aspect, right? It's like, okay,
sure.
Cause I mean, my core business is Future Forth, where I do like keynote presentations and training and workshops and all of that. And I love it. And, the two do go hand in hand. The two do, cross pollinate quite a bit. So
perfect. And you're getting experts to speak, like you're building that community connection. Is that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm doing like today, actually, I did my first webinar. I've done hundreds of webinars. When I was speaking for Google, especially, I did hundreds of webinars.
Okay.
And during COVID as well, of course, my keynotes quickly became virtual. So, I always prefer in person, of course. So I know if my jokes are any good. So it's been really, really exciting, to see it take off like it has.
Perfect. Is one small step a listener can take if they feel they may have ADHD, they're not really sure, but they are concerned. What can they do?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, there is a free assessment at wisesquirrels.com. So you can take that. I don't see the results of that at all. So I do encourage people to do that. It's free. It only takes like 5-10 minutes. Besides that, or in addition to that, I would just go and see your doctor. Start with your GP, and make sure that the first question is what do you think about ADHD? Just to make sure, there's quacks everywhere. So you got to make sure you're in good hands there. But so I would recommend that. My podcast, I talk to a lot of subject matter experts and high achievers as well with ADHD. For example, I spoke with Dr. Bob Bradley, or excuse me, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Bob Dempsey, who was the International Space Station director for NASA for 16 years.
Oh, wow.
And wasn't diagnosed until he was 60, which is pretty cool. So yeah, he was great. So I'm always looking for like high achiever guests for the podcast as well. So, but yeah, and then tons of like really smart subject matter experts related. So, yeah, it's fun.
Very cool. Very cool. Before I let you go, anything like we didn't cover that you want to sure Gen Xers specifically know in this field, in this space?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more to talk about. I think the comorbidities aspect is important to consider, which is that a couple different things. Like there's that which means if you have been diagnosed with anxiety or depression or even like bipolar or OCD, those are all comorbidities from ADHD. So it is quite likely that if you have ADHD, you probably suffer from one or more of those additional things. So for example, I have anxiety and with a hint of depression on the side. It's delicious. And so the important thing, and Russell Barkley talks about this, is that in order to treat those things, you need to treat the root cause of it. It doesn't mean that if you have anxiety that you have ADHD or any of the stuff I've mentioned, but you could have ADHD that's causing it. And it doesn't mean curing it, but it means treating the ADHD. The same goes with life expectancy, where with undiagnosed and untreated ADHD, your life expectancy is up to 13 years, or can be up to 13 years less.
Wow.
And that's because of our tendencies of, we're prone to addiction if left untreated. Right? If you're not being treated, we're prone to addiction. We're prone to excessiveness, overeating, impulsivity. So you're driving too fast, or you make a turn too quickly and you don't think. So this is why it's so important to get diagnosed and to get the treatment you need. There's a lot more I could say about that, but
13 years is a lot. I'm kind of shocked.
Up to 13 years. Yeah. So, but again, if you're being treated, and you're self-aware and you understand your operating system, as I say, then that quickly gets abated. Like you can course correct. Like it doesn't mean you're going to drop dead 13 years sooner, or even one day sooner. But the important thing is that with self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-love, which is part of the root down that I talked about, all of this, it plays a big part. And things like meditation and mindfulness also are just have been hugely helpful for me. So that, journaling, therapy, an ADHD coach or a business coach or career coach, as I mentioned, that's stuff that I do. It's important to get the support you need, and also to let people know. It's up to the individual whether they want to ask for accommodations at school or at work. There are, a lot of companies and schools will now provide accommodations like extra time or, headphones, all sorts of stuff. But, there is still stigma. So it's up to the individual to decide how they want to handle that. But there's a lot of great companies out there. And because I've worked a lot in tech, a lot of tech companies now are actually hiring neurodiverse people. So they're looking for people like Microsoft and Google and, many others. IBM is another one. And so, that if you're, I know Gen Xers, we go through, especially with ADHD, you go through a lot of careers,
Yeah.
a lot of different jobs. And so if you're changing course or you're stuck in the middle, reach out to me. I'm happy to chat with folks too.
I got to take your test. I've done a few career changes in my life.
Oh my God. I've had so many jobs. It's ridiculous. Like so many jobs and so many careers. Even in Toronto, I worked for Mervish Productions, big theater company in Toronto. I went from there to the Toronto Star. I worked as a promotions executive for the Toronto Star. From there, I worked for Can West Global Television and worked for Global before moving south to Nashville. And, here working for an email marketing company that was acquired, and then a hardware tech company that was acquired, and then going out on my own. So, you do. But looking at your life through this lens gives you clarity and helps you understand, and you can start to connect the dots. Like for me, it's communication strategy. Like it all comes down to how we communicate. I wrote a book called New Business Networking about running your own events, attending events, conferences, all that stuff. But then also about using LinkedIn, for example. I was a keynote speaker for an event from LinkedIn and Google as well. So like using these technologies to improve relationships and to build networks so you can build your career and your business. All of that is so important. And looking at my life through that lens now, I understand that it's all about communication for me.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have landed on that without having the clarity. Otherwise, I would have just been like, squirrel. Yeah.
Very good. You brought up ADHD coaches, and you're one of them. I had never heard that there was such an animal. When somebody looks for a coach, what should they look for? Is it somebody who's gone through it themselves? Is there a certification process? Like what do you?
So to be clear, I'm not on paper, I'm not an ADHD coach.
Okay.
However, I have coached many people with small businesses and helped them grow their businesses. And I've also helped individuals with careers and when they're stuck and trying to figure out what's next, and personal branding and LinkedIn and all that stuff. So the thing is, I do it now. All my clients are ADHDers. And I bring a knowledge of ADHD. Now there's different organizations that do certifications for ADHD coaching proper. I have not taken this, and I've heard different things. So I've heard good things, but then, it depends on what you're looking for sure. But it's important to understand that when you're looking for a coach, you're looking for somebody to help you accomplish whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to get coaching about something. I offer a free coaching session as an introduction. So at wisesquirrels.com/coaching. So anybody listening or watching can schedule a free call with me if they like, to see if I'm a fit to help them. But yeah, there's lots of different organizations. ADA is a great one. And I forget the acronym. There's so many acronyms. But if you Google like ADHD coaches, and I've interviewed a lot of them on my podcast too. So again, it's just a matter of where you are in life and what you're trying to accomplish. I think is a good starting point.
Excellent. All right. Anything else you wanted to cover?
I'm good. I encourage everybody to visit wisesquirrels.com. Again, you can take that free test, a free assessment. You can also listen to the podcast, and I'm an open book. I'd love to hear from folks. So you can email me or reach out. Dave Delaney on all the socials, the ones I'm still using at least. So.
Perfect. We'll put that all the notes. We'll put that in all of the notes. And I'm so glad we connected.
Yeah, me too.
One, I have to check on myself. I know my wife has ADHD. She's always stated that. She's never actually gotten checked either.
Yeah.
And we picked up on that because we noticed a change in our kids. And I think, as you said, I'm not surprised that it's something that carries through genes. So great information. Definitely wisesquirrels.com. I'll be taking a look. And Dave, thanks so much for taking the time today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a million. It was fun.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Cheers. Yeah, thanks a million. It was fun.
Need to understand it is entrepreneurial.